So today what we're going to talk about is specifically health, stress, and coping. So let's get the screen up. It should take a moment to load, but it should be ready soon. There we are. So, chapter 12 is all about like health, stress, and coping, but we're going to specifically kind of lean in and key in on the stress part. So, what stress is, um, how our body responds to stress, and then we're going to look at how we cope with stress, and then how stress affects us. So, go over the 5 sections that we're actually going to look at. So, what stress is, how the body responds to stress, how we cope with stress, certain personalities that affect our health and how they respond to stress, and then finishing up with lifestyle, health, and well-being. So, we'll look at the learning objectives real quick. So, we're going to define stress and then look at the four types of stressors, and then the 4 types of conflict situations. And then section 2 is going to focus in on cognitive appraisal. So how our thought processes and our biological stress response. And then section 3, we're going to distinguish with the coping styles. The 2 specific coping styles are problem-focused and emotion-focused coping styles. And then adaptive ways you can manage stress. Section 4 is all about type A through type D personalities and the relationships between personality types and health. Define learn helplessness and explain its influence on health. And then finishing up with section 4, the 3 factors of a hardy personality. And then section 5, we're going to focus in on health defeating behaviors. Alcohol use, smoking, how that influences health negatively, obviously. Discriminate STIs, sexually transmitted infections. Identify health promoting behaviors, and then identify the factors that contribute to happiness and well-being. Like I was saying before, though, the 3 most important sections I would say that you'd want to focus in on and kind of lean more into, press the button, are sections 1 through 3. So stress, how we handle stress, and then problem and emotion-focused coping. Hard to say. So I want you to take a moment in your notes and think about what you think stress is. So just take 1 or 2 minutes and then just kind of write down what you think stress is, what you think stress is not. Just 1 or 2 minutes. And then while you work on what you think it is, I'll get this up. So, what is stress? So, first, I'll give you our book definition. It is an event or environmental stimulus that is known as our stressor that we respond to because we perceive it as challenging or threatening. There we go. Let's zoom in on that. So, environment or an event, okay? We respond to it because we find it to be difficult or threatening to us. So, let's think of a couple examples. I'm going to put these examples of stress for, let's say, a college student. Upcoming exam. Probably be considered stressful. A public speaking project. Most people don't like to speak in public, so that'd probably be considered stressful. A fight with a friend would probably be considered stressful as well. All those things could probably be considered bad, but there are good stress too. A wedding, that'd be good stress. Let's see, having a child, that'd be considered stressful, but these are good stress, known as good stress or eustress. So stress isn't always bad or always good. It's can be considered both. But obviously, bad stress affects you worse. But we'll hold off on that right now. Let's keep on our definition. So it's an event in one's life you respond to because you find it to be difficult, like I was saying. So a couple things that you need to know for your definition is let me change back colors. So we all have stressors in our lives. So it's stress is different for everyone. Okay. There are bodily reactions to stress. So think about those examples you were thinking of or you wrote down. How might you respond to them if you're in that situation? Sweaty palms. You might get nervous. Things such as that. And then by perceiving, so let's see, by interpreting the event as stressful, you cope with the event or the situation. So let's go. Let's see. So you find out you have an exam you didn't study for. You react to that. You may start ruminating on it, like constantly thinking about it. So that's your body reacting to it. You may start to get nervous. You may start to, sweat a little bit. But you decide that event's stressful, and then you decide how you cope with the event, successfully or not. So you could decide to stay up all night and study. Or you could decide not to do anything. So just one thing to keep in mind is that definition of stress may be helpful for you to come up with your own definition of it as well. So let's go back to our screen. So there are, give it a sec. There we go. There are 4 types of stressors. So what we're going to do for the rest of section 1 is kind of break down each of them. I'm going to leave this up for a moment so you can write these down in your notes. And then what I'm going to do is go through each of these on our whiteboard, our handy dandy virtual whiteboard. So we have major life and events, which I'm going to call these MLEs. So you may want to note that. We have catastrophes, daily hassles, and conflicts. So let's go through each of these and define them. So first, major life events. Number 1. break each of these down. So, like I said, putting our definitions in red. So, one key thing that occurred in the studying of major life events, and give you a couple examples of major life events: getting married, having a new family member, so like a child. It's probably a simpler way to look at that. Personal achievements. So like getting a promotion, getting a new job. What are some other ones? Losing a spouse. Or family member. Those would be major life events. Something that changes your life drastically, good or bad. So keep that in mind. So major life events, your life, good or bad. They can also be pretty simple. Going on a vacation would be a major life event. So Holmes and Rock, or Rake, we'll actually go to this slide in a moment, created this thing called the Social Readjustment Rating Scale, or the SRRS. So what they did was they interviewed a lot of people to find out stressors that they had going on. And then they wanted to see how this affected someone's health. And then they asked them to see which life events they perceived to be, spelled it wrong. Terrible spelling. To be more or less stressful. So from this, Holmes and Rock used it to make their social readjustment rating scale. And that is kind of like the main, the pinnacle of MLE studies, is this use of the social readjustment rating scale. So the higher the number, the more stressful the event was perceived to be. So, give you two examples. They measured on their scale these life change units. So, let me think. So, losing a spouse was 100 on the life change units. Actually, the highest one. So, the life change units was, so put this definition in parentheses right here. See, it's the value assigned to the MLE, major life event. So losing a spouse is actually the highest one on there. So it's 100 life change units. So it's considered one of the most stressful things you could go through. While, minor violation of the law. So like getting a ticket was 11 life change units. So it wasn't really considered that stressful. It had a low stress amount. So going on with these life changes, and on their scale, which I'll put over here, get my pencil. There we go. So on the scale, there were positive, negative, life events. So keep that in mind too. Weddings, I can speak from experience, are incredibly stressful, but they're also pretty positive. But they still carry a pretty weight of heavy life change events because you can spend months to years planning for a wedding, going through a lot of stress that involves financial stress. But at the end of the day, it's a positive major life event. So, a couple other things when it comes to life events. It's not how it impacts your life. There are a couple of factors involved with how stressful the major life event is perceived to be. Or seen as. So go through a couple of those factors, and then I'll break each one of these down. So one, was it voluntary or involuntary? So, two, how desirable was the life change? Oh, I forgot my number 2. And then number 3, was the life change schedule. I'm gonna put this in, I want to do like lilac purple. So did you intentionally choose for this life change to happen? So getting married, that's voluntary. So it would be perceived as less stressful. So getting married, you choose to do that. Losing your job, that would be involuntary. So there'd be some stress behind it because you didn't choose for that to occur. How desirable was the life change? So let's say, for example, getting a promotion. So that's stressful, but you wanted it. So it's a desirable life change. And then finally the life change scheduled. So marriage, kids. For the most part, those are scheduled unless the child's unexpected. So if it's not scheduled, you would probably find it stressful. So that's major life events. So moving on from there, we're going to talk about catastrophes or catastrophic events. So, let's see, clean my whiteboard. 2, so these are I'm gonna change my color. These occur suddenly. So these would be like house fires, tornadoes, things such as that. So and they require huge levels of adaptation. So they take a long time to get used to. and then they cannot be predicted or planned for. So losing your house in a fire, can't plan or predict that. You have to basically rearrange your whole life. You have to get a new home, you have to get new stuff, things such as that. So these are incredibly stressful. Places that have wars, so those would be considered catastrophic events. But an interesting thing about catastrophes, and I'm actually going to go back to my screen. There we go. So the thing about catastrophes that are interesting is that they don't affect everyone the same way. So a tornado hitting one person's house and the way the person copes and finds it to be is not going to affect someone down the road. It's an interesting thing called post-traumatic growth. It's also known as benefit finding. So a lot of people who you may find reading the new, maybe not the newspaper, but reading online, people who's lost their home or have diagnosed with terminal cancer, things such as that. You may find themselves saying something to the effect of, well, it made me realize how lucky I am. It made me reevaluate my life. It changed my life for the better. Because people who go through post-traumatic growth, they reevaluate their lives, so they find what means the most to them, and then it helps them initiate positive changes. So they may decide, oh, well, I lost everything, so maybe I don't need a lot of stuff. Maybe I'll start donating my time or donating a lot of my, what's good, sorry, I'm trying to think of a good phrase to use. Donate my time or donate my stuff, because it's just stuff. I lost it. I'm still the same person. I'm still, happy and here. So I don't need as much stuff as used to. So that would be initiating these positive changes. So, okay, let's go to everyday hassles. So I'm going to leave, or daily hassles. So I want you to think about this. So take 1 or 2 minutes and think about pet peeves you may have, everyday annoyances that you might have, traffic, things such as that. And kind of go over and make a list. Do about 5, or think of about 5. I'll give you a moment. And then we'll kind of go into our third type of stressor. All right, so you probably have a couple of daily hassles. Traffic, having to get up early, dealing with long lines, things such as that. So the interesting thing about daily hassles is, there we are, throw up our definition, 3. They're everyday irritations and frustrations. So having to take out the trash, wait in line, dealing with traffic jams. They're not terrible, obviously. They're but they're small. But we deal with so much of them that they actually are seen as our biggest source of stress. So let's go back to our, I'll give you a moment. Actually, I'll throw it up here. So one correlation seen. Number of hassles increase. Physical or mental health start to decrease. Ugh. What kind of correlation is that, by the way? If one goes up, one goes down. Negative. So one goes up, one goes down. Conversely, so the less daily hassles you have, the more your mental health that stables out or increases. So, and one other thing to note about these daily hassles is how you perceive them. So, let's use traffic jams. Do you see it as a stressful event or a common occurrence? Or when you, let's see, when you wait in line, do you see that as like the end all be all worst thing that happens to you? So so it's better to see them as just a common occurrence as opposed to a stress in your life. Because it will help your health. So the less stressful you perceive it, the better off you are in the long run. So that's daily hassles. So daily hassles are just everyday frustrations, everyday irritations that we all go through that are just common to existing and being alive. So finishing up, we have conflict. So conflict is just choosing between two or more desires, needs, demands. So, for example, choosing to study for an exam or going out to a party. That's conflict. So you have two things that are demanded of you, and you can choose either one. So which do you choose, Bill? You're probably going out. Let's be honest. It's probably going out. If you said studying, good job. I commend you. So let's go over 4 basic forms of conflict. So I'm gonna go back to my slide. So we have 4 basic forms of conflict. So these are situations where you got to choose between 2 or more things, if you want to think of it, things. So we have approach. You can think of this as, let me change. There we go. Win situations. So these are the easiest to solve because they're choosing between 2 good things. Do you go out to get ice cream with your best friend, or do you stay at home watching a movie with your partner? Both of those sound great. So it's easy to resolve because it's like, either way, I'm happy. Do you eat strawberry ice cream or chocolate ice cream? That'd be a win-win for me because I think both are fantastic. So there's the least amount of stress involved with these approach or win-win conflicts. Approach. These are sorry, the avoidance. These are lose situations. These are choosing between two different things that you do not want to choose between. Do you study for your math exam or study for your psych exam? You probably don't want to do either. So they immobilize you. Or you get my color fixed. You tend to do neither of these. So think about when you have like a bunch of stuff. You have like a to-do list that's like a mile long. You may find sometimes that instead of doing your to-do list, going through those conflicts, going through all those demands of you, you tend to sit on your phone and go on Facebook or Reddit or whatever. Or you tend to, instead of studying for your psych exam or your math exam, you all of a sudden have to clean up your room. That's what I mean by immobilize. So it makes it hard to choose between either. So you choose neither. And obviously, there's going to be greater perceived stress because these are both kind of crap situations. You can also think of avoidance as like catch-22s, damned if you do, damned if you don't. And then approach avoidance is when choosing between two or more two things that have upsides and downsides. So approach avoidance would be like, let's see, choosing to get a dog, for example. You are conflicted because the approach avoidance, the conflict is, it has a lot of benefits, but it has a lot of negatives. Getting dogs great because they'll keep you company. They'll stick around with you. They'll be a friend to you, but they also can be expensive and they also take up a lot of time and things such as that. So these also may immobilize you as well. So let's look at a couple examples. See if I can make this bigger. That'll do. So approach avoidance, choosing a movie, going to the Johnny Depp movie, going to the Will Smith movie. This is assuming that you're a fan of both of them. So it's a win-win situation because you know you're going to be happy going to see either movie. Avoidance, assuming that you hate okra and beets, which I'm gassed, that offends me, but what else? You hate either of those vegetables, so you don't want to eat okra and you don't want to eat beets. So you may be immobilized and choose to eat neither. The example I use, the approach avoidance conflict. So getting a pet, it's approach because they're super cuddly and great, but it's avoidance because you have to clean up messes that they poop and pee everywhere. And then multiple approach avoidance is just this between multiple things. So trying to choose between three jobs. One pays really well, but it'll take up a lot of your time. One is really close to your house, but it doesn't pay very well. So that would be approach avoidance because there's good sides and downs. There's pros and cons to each one. So let's go over section 1. So you go to a dentist and find out that you have to get a tooth extracted. The only time the dentist can schedule your appointment is the same time as your trial appointment. The situation is an example of avoidance. Those are two things that you don't want to do. So I highly doubt you'd want to do both of those things. So that'd be avoidance. And then which of the following does the social readjustment rating scale consider the most stressful life event for adults? Death of a spouse. 100 life change units. So highest you can get. You go, oh, well, I don't know why, but it copied these twice. So ignore. So that is section 1. So let's move on to section 2. So there are a couple of things you do once you find out you're in a stressful event. So like I said, we all go through stressors. So let's break this down on our whiteboard. So let's say you find out you have a speech to do in class tomorrow. So you're first going to interpret the event or make a primary appraisal. And then I'll explain a little further in depth on our slide what I mean by each of these. But first, I want to go through this example. So, do you interpret the event as stressful, positive, or irrelevant? Meaning it doesn't really matter. I spelled irrelevant wrong. Trying to spell irreverent, I guess. So, so if you perceive it as so you hate doing speeches, so you would perceive it as stressful. Or, well, actually, you hate doing speeches, or you are not prepared. So you'd see it as stressful. Okay, but let's think of it another way. You are super excited to do your presentation. So you would see it as positive. Or you don't really care. You don't really feel either way about it. So that might be like a so you don't really care about your speech. So you'd see it as irrelevant. All right. So your primary appraisal is just about interpreting the event. So do you see it as stressful, positive, or doesn't really matter? So how you interpret the event leads to your positive or negative emotions. If you interpret as stressful, you're going to have negative emotions. If you interpret it as positive, you're going to have pretty positive emotions about it. So then, once you appraise the event, so once you interpret the event, and evaluate or come up with what you need to do. That is going to be known as your secondary appraisal. So your coping strategies. So you going to write your speech / practice it? Are you going to, or are you going to take an easy day, deal with the stress? And then what do you think the behavior would be the most successful in managing your stress? And that what behavior you feel is the most successful depends on your available resources. So how ready you are to deal with the stress. If that's the only thing you have to do tomorrow is to do your speech, you're probably going to be like, okay, I'll go home all day and practice my speech. If you're dealing with 5 or 6 stressful things already, you'd probably be less likely to cope by practicing your speech. You may want to just take an easy day and hope that you do okay on the speech. All right, so go back to our slides. I also want to go over the GAS real quick, or the General Adaptation Syndrome. And this is kind of how our body reacts to stress. So I'll leave these up and I'll leave this slide up and kind of walk you through an example of a stressful situation. So let's use the making a speech example. So so you have made your primary appraisal. You perceive it as stressful. You come up with your coping strategies. Then your body starts to react to the stress. That's known as general adaptation, or GAS. So it's the physical response that you're going to have when you face a stressor. So there's 3 phases of it. We first have the alarm reaction. So our fight or flight response. So when you first find out that you have that speech and perceived it as stressful, it's when the alarm bells start going off in your head and you're like, oh my gosh, I gotta practice my speech, and I gotta prepare my speech, and I gotta make sure I have all these sources for my speech, and I gotta make sure that I don't stumble and mess up. So you go through, and don't worry about knowing this like for sure. Just have a general idea and review a book or email me with further questions, obviously. So once you go through that first phase, the alarm reaction, if you're still stressed, so let's say that you didn't have a speech written, so you're like 6 hours into working on your speech, you're going to eventually, and this is different for everyone, hit that resistance phase. So that's your body realizing it's still under stress. So you're getting hormones produced. This is when you know, this is your body helping you deal with the stress. So it's leveling out. You're trying to resist getting overly stressed. Well, let's say you pull 12 hours. So you pull an all-nighter. Eventually, your body is going to start to wear and tear from being so stressed. So you start to get stress headaches. You start to get sleepy. You start to get angry, things such as that. That is that exhaustion phase. So you usually, hopefully, do not make it to the exhaustion phase. This might be another way to look at it, and I'll go back to that slide. So, let's see. So give me one moment. Share blackboard or whiteboard. Actually, I have a better idea. We'll go back to it. There we are. So you're in the alarm phase when you first find out. So you're at less than normal levels of resistance, or hormones, if you want to think of it like that, because your body is on the fight or flight response. I got to deal with this right now. How am I going to deal with this? And then as you are dealing with it, your body wants to fight off the problems that occur from stress, because your body works, to put it very simplistically. So you won't get this from your biology or chemistry or nursing or whatever. But as you're dealing with the stress, your body is going to like put its guard up and help you push through the stress levels. So you normally only go through the alarm and resistance phase, finding out the stress, working through the stress, and then say performing the speech, and then you're done. This goes away because the stress is gone. But if you spend too long getting stressed out, working too hard, staying up very long time working on it, you're going to hit exhaustion. It's where you get backaches, stomach aches, headaches, cramps. So if you find yourself like in the school year feeling this way, it's because your body has been working in this exhaustion phase of the general adaptation syndrome, because it's been so stressed out with no lower levels of stress that the health effects start to occur. All right. So you are more vulnerable to illness during which stage? And then that would be the exhaustion. That's when your body starts to just give out, as I was saying. And then Anisha was shopping at a mall when she heard a person yelling angrily close by. Anisha turned around to see who was yelling and saw that two adults were arguing. So Anisha went back to shopping. In psychological terms, Anisha just made a primary appraisal. So she looked at the situation. Was it positive, negative, or irrelevant to her? Did it matter to her? The yelling was just two adults arguing, so she just went back and ignored it. So that was her primary appraisal. Now let's say that the adults that were yelling were people with her, and then she started making a list of in her head, like, how does she cope with this? What does she need to do? That would then be a secondary appraisal. And that's actually a good lead-in. So with our secondary appraisals, that's when we come up with these ideas of how to cope with situations. So how do you cope with stress? So come up with a couple ways that you might cope with stress. Write it down. Write 4 or 5 down, or have a couple in your head. And then as I go through this section, kind of think of situations and apply the situations to whether you that's hard to say. Use problem focused coping more or emotion focused coping more. All right, so now that you have those ideas in your head, let's go through dealing with stress and coping. So we're gonna first, there we go, get that fixed. Look at coping. So we got to define coping. So behaviors that we engage in to manage our stressors. So when you're under a lot of stress, do you clean? Do you exercise? Do you watch TV? Do you go for a run? Coping is just what you do when you're stressed out and the ways you do it, the ways you deal with it. And there are two overall types of coping. So first, we're going to go through problem-focused coping. And then we're going to ease our way into emotion-focused coping. So let's go over problem-focused coping. So problem-focused coping is when you want to change or control the environment that is causing the stress. So let's go back to our section 2 example. If you find out that you have a speech you have to do tomorrow, and you decide, I'm going to go home and study and work on my speech, you're controlling or altering the environment that is causing the stress. Because the stress is that you might do bad on your speech. So you're altering that to cope with it. So you study. This is, you can think of this as an active form of coping, because you're actively doing something to deal with the stress. So obviously there are situations where you can't control or alter the environment. There are obviously, and we'll get to this on the next slide, forms of stress where you feel like you can't do anything. So let's think back to people who have an internal or an external locus of control. People who have an internal locus of control feel that they can change their environment. So they're probably going to be more likely to use problem-focused coping. But what about these people who feel they external locus control? They feel they have no, they feel like they have no control over their environment. They are going to be less likely to engage in this type of coping. So two more things before we move on to emotion-focused coping is these are more likely to lead to positive health outcomes because you're actively dealing with the stress and removing the stress or the thing that's causing the stress. And then, like I said previously, when you feel you can control the situation, you're, don't know how that happened. So when you think the situation is uncontrollable and there's nothing you can do, you're going to rely more on emotion-focused coping. So let's see here. Oh, hit the wrong button. Sorry, guys. So emotion-focused coping. So once it loads, there you go. You get there. So emotion-focused coping is, if you want to think of it this way, a more passive form of coping, or less, actually instead of saying passive, less active. It's probably a better way to think about it. So this is when you try and control your behaviors. So you're not worried about the environment. You're trying to control how you react to the stressor. So emotion-focused coping might be your boss yells at you, and that makes you feel really stressed out. So you go home and like meditate or relax. So you try not to feel stressed. Or defense mechanisms are also a form of emotion-focused coping. Taking your anger out on someone, definitely. Obviously not helpful in the long run, but you try to lessen the effects of the negative emotions. So one way you do it is through, I already mentioned this one, but defense mechanisms, and we'll go through those in a moment. And another way you do this is through cognitive reappraisal. So you alter the way you interpret the stressful events. So if you feel the stressor is uncontrollable, so like your boss yells at you, and obviously you feel like you can't yell at your boss, so you alter your interpretation of the event. So that might be, say, for example, you may, instead of saying your boss doesn't like you, you may interpret it as your boss is also having a stressful day. So let me give you another example. Let me pull up my whiteboard. So, didn't mean to do that. So, cognitive reappraisal. So, just to remind you of the definition, we alter our interpretation of the event. So, let's say your spouse is running late. Or your spouse. Your spouse is running late. So, that may stress you out. So, there we go. You're stressed because, let's say, for example, you were worried something happened to them. So, if you think all the way back to the last section, section 2, and we talked about primary appraisal. This is your primary appraisal and your secondary. I'll explain what I mean. Your primary appraisal, the event as stressful. Your secondary appraisal is emotion focused coping. You worry. Okay, so one thing you can do is this cognitive reappraisal. So you reinterpret it. So let's say you, instead of thinking something's happened to them, let me think. You reappraise or reinterpret by saying maybe they got caught in traffic. So instead of looking at it as a negative event, so instead of saying, instead of interpreting it as a negative event, get one different color. That would be your first kind of reaction to it. You interpret it in a more positive light. So that helps you deal with your negative emotion. So it's emotionally constructive. So you could read it or see it as like you take a step back and say, well, hate to use this example. They're not cheating on me. They're probably just running late. I can't jump to rash negative conclusions. Let's just think. Maybe they just are stuck in traffic or had to put gas in. So you take a step back from the event and reinterpret it in a more positive way. So that is cognitive reappraisal. So let's go over a couple defense mechanisms. Don't worry about writing these down by any means. They probably sound familiar to you anyway. It's not in the same terms, the same words, if you want to think of it that way. So we got denial. So let's see. Going out partying the night before an exam denies how this behavior affects your exam performance. No, the exam was just hard. It has nothing to do with the fact that I went out last night. See, regression. So we're returning to an earlier stage of development. So adults, when they're stressed out, they may throw tantrums or pout or whine. You see this in children when they deal with getting a new sibling. You may find that they regress by start wetting the bed, sucking their thumb, throwing very varied types of temperature tantrums. Sorry, need a sip of water. Let's see here. Let's see. Oh, sublimation. This is one I've mentioned earlier, and I mentioned in the last unit. So when people are angry or upset or stressed, they may like direct their emotions into going for a jog or cleaning their room. Repression, that's just like, well, these all sound familiar to you. I just want you to know exactly what these defense mechanisms, the definitions. So it's you use these first unconsciously. So you use them unconsciously. If you recall back to our last chapter, you are not aware you're using them. I'll put this in red. I'll highlight that. So you use them unconsciously. You're not aware you're using them. And they help maintain your self-esteem, your self-image. So finishing up with section 3, let's go over how you manage stress. So I won't spend a lot of time because these all sound pretty familiar, I'm sure. So exercise, a way to manage stress. Relaxation. Progressive relaxation might be you your eyes and you learn how to relax your toes. And then you breathe. And then you're like, okay, relax your leg muscles. Okay. And then you start relaxing your muscles progressively, systematically, all the way up your body or muscle groups in your body. Having a good social support relationship. So having someone you can be like, oh my gosh, let me tell you a day I had. And they'll be like, ooh, tell me about the day you had. So having people you can go to and do that. Spirituality, religion, that's a good way to deal with stress as well. Guided imagery. So that might be, give you an example, and if you want to do this, if you're feeling stressed, go for it. So you close your eyes. So close your eyes. And you imagine you're at a beach. It's like 80 degrees. Not too hot, not too cold. Well, obviously not too cold. It's 77 degrees. So it's not like terribly hot. And there's this nice breeze that's blowing. So you're sitting on a lawn chair and you can hear the waves crashing against the sand. And you can feel the sun just beaming down on you. See, that's nice. So it's guided imagery. So somebody else walks you through this pleasant and calming image to help you relax. Meditation, focusing on optimism. So actually, there we go. So looking on the bright side. Laughter. So laughter is the best medicine, I say. So being able to laugh at the situation, though it might be stressful, being able to see the oddness of it, maybe. And then effectively managing your time. So if you find that you're always forgetting when your exams are, you're always forgetting, always being stressed out because you feel like you never have time to do anything, it may be that you're not using your time effectively. So you can get a planner or kind of like space out your time to work on specific classes, things such as that. So what I'm going to do, because I don't want these videos to be too terribly long for you, is I'm actually going to go through the review of section 3, and then I'm going to put section 4 and 5 on a separate video. That way it's spaced out a little bit. That way you don't feel like you have to watch it all the way through. You can take a breather. So let's do section 3 review. So organizing your time better is best classified as what type of coping skill? That would be problem-focused coping. So you're taking an active step to do something. It is common for young children to react to the birth of a sibling by regressing to earlier behaviors such as sucking their thumb again or wanting to be fed from a baby bottle. Such behaviors exemplify what type of coping skill? There we go. Well, that is a type of defense mechanism, regression to be specific. So that we emotion-focused coping. And then and don't worry about the fact that I didn't go over this. I left it in here just for this reason. But if you use, the fact that emotion-focused coping is not as good, there you go. Which of the following is least effective in stress management? Defense mechanism. So if you think about this, all these minus defense mechanisms are problem-focused. So defense mechanisms, emotion-focused coping, that tends to be less effective. So emotion-focused coping. So apologies, I'm losing my voice. But as always, feel free to reach out to me with any questions or concerns. You can tell me, hop on virtual hours if you need some help with sections 12, 1 through 3. But have a great day.